Why would you use automated scoring? What benefits does automated scoring have over human rating?
There are three major benefits, I think, to automated scoring. That is standardization, reliability, and practicality. So let's look at each of these. If you think of standardization first, we have automated test delivery, which means that the test is delivered or administered to each candidate in a controlled and standardized way, a controlled environment. So it doesn't matter where the test taker takes the test. They could be taking it via telephone or computer, and they can be doing it anywhere in the world at 24 hours a day at any time. They will always be interacting with the same centralized system. And the system presents items from a central item pool. So items are selected from the pool, they're presented to the candidate in a controlled manner. We know how the items are drawn from the pool and presented to the candidate. The timing is controlled, and also the difficulty of the items is controlled relative to things like the speech style of the item and the pace of the item, the difficulty of the item. So when we present a test to a test taker, we know that every test taker is having the same test experience. A knock-on advantage of this is that when you have a human-administered interview, you're only interacting with one person. You're hearing one person's voice, one person's speech style, and that may not be representative of all the different kinds of speech styles that you're going to interact with in real life. With the automated system, you may encounter 10 or 15 different examiner voices or item prompt voices during the test. So you get to be exposed to different kinds of speech styles, speech rates, intonations, and accents. So despite the variety in what you hear, it's all carefully controlled in advance. So that's the standardization of the test delivery. And then we have reliability. Here, the test taker's responses are again sent centrally to our scorers, our scoring servers. And these are, remember, these are trained using expert human ratings. But they're not just trained with one rater or two raters. We have a team of expert raters, again from different geographic regions, who listen to many, many test responses and score them multiply. Every response is scored multiple times. And through this approach of accumulation of measures, when a test response is scored, it's not being scored by one human, it's being scored collectively by a team of expert judges. And this is what the automated scoring models are predicting. Of course, the automated scoring models, they don't get tired, they don't have a bad day, they don't suffer from bias, they don't have a bias of different accents, they don't judge the candidate by what they look like or how they sound. There's no discrimination among different accents. So it's a very objective method of measurement. And it's always going to be the same. If that test taker says exactly the same response, exactly the same way, it's always going to be scored the same way. As opposed to a human rater who may score it one way on one day, another day on another day, and so on. So we have a very reliable scoring system. And the third advantage was the practicality of it. It's very logistically difficult to set up interviews. You have to train your raters. You have to standardize the way they ask questions. You have to standardize the way they score. And then you don't have to do it once. You have to continually monitor it, retrain them. You have to hire new raters of the correct qualification and train them too. And you have to schedule them into rooms, and it's a very resource-intensive procedure. It's resource-intensive for candidates as well, because sometimes they have to wait a long time for their test. They may have been taking a paper test that morning, and they may have already done 2 hours of testing, and now they may be waiting for their interview test. So I think it's kinder to the candidate in a way as well, to have the spoken testing there on demand in a standardized way, where they can be sure that they're being scored fairly, in a way that they might not be had there been an interviewer. There is one thing with interview tests which we should consider, which is that the global approach to interviewing isn't standardized. If you have a examinee in Japan and the examiner happens to be an English native speaker who's living in Japan and is familiar with the Japanese accent and forgiving of the kinds of mistakes that Japanese learners make, then that rater is going to have a completely different evaluation of the test taker's language than someone, say, who lives and works in Europe and who has never spoken with a Japanese person before. That person would assess the Japanese examinee very differently. So these kinds of problems are washed out with the automated approach. And it's a very graceful and fair approach for the test taker.